Welcome to Apple Island in the middle of Orchard Lake in Orchard Lake, Michigan. Ours is an island with several names. Menasagorning is an adaptation of the native word for apple place. Some old references call it Orchard Island or Campbell Island. Since the 1970s, it's been dedicated the Marjorie Ward Strong Woodland Sanctuary, but for short, we'll just refer to it as Apple Island. We will take a tour of the island today, guided by a map drawn by a young caretaker from the 1900s, Winfred Hamlin, and we'll hear the words of Dr. Campbell Harvey, grandson of Colin and Caroline Campbell, the longest-running owners of the island, who purchased the island in 1856 and summered there for over 60 years. Through our tour, we'll get to see what the island was like then and now. We'll begin our tour on the north shore of the island, at the island dock.
The stone dock was wide enough so that the horses and wagon could be driven right off onto the scow. The mainland dock was at the base of a high bank called the Bluff. Up it was a carefully graded road, well concealed, connecting with the Commerce Road, which ran along the top of the bank. It was from this high bluff that persons who wished to come to the island stood and called. Someone was sure to hear and row over.
Today's dock is in probably the same location as the dock that was used in the time of the islanders who vacationed here in the late 1800s through about 1940. These stairs are built and maintained by the West Bloomfield School District, who is the current owner of the island, being gifted it by the Ward Strong family in 1970. As we leave the area of High Seat, which back in the day was the best view from the island, we start walking along the eastern shore. The end of the island was much smaller and narrower and low and swampy, but toward the eastern shore, the ground rose to 6 or 8 feet above lake level and afforded plenty of ground for the houses of Cousin Annie King, Uncle Forrest, and H.C. Ellison of Cleveland. At one time, there were 4 cottages in this area that gave the adult children and family friends their own place to stay when they visited the island. Now, all that's left are depressions where the foundations would have been, and scatterings of bricks where the chimneys fell, broken plate glass from the windows. Since the late 1990s, archaeologists from Cranbrook Institute of Science, St. Mary's University, Western Michigan University, and other institutions have come to the island to research what life would have been like in the native and more current vacationing days. The next part of our journey takes us along the southeastern shore trail and then up through the center of the island on a road that would have passed through cornfields and past the vegetable garden back in the Campbell's days.
Running down the center of the island, back of grandmother's by the fruit cellar, were a vegetable garden, potato patch, and a sweet cornfield. A wide road bordered on both sides with apple trees to a wide gate in the eastern fence. I used to enjoy, after being asked to, digging potatoes, picking a mess of sweet corn, choosing a couple of musk melons, even picking peas, beans, or cucumber.
The center of the island was dominated by the old homestead, originally built in the Greek Revival style in the 1850s, and then subsequently expanded by Colin and Caroline Campbell to accommodate their 5 children.
At the apex of this triangle of roads was a very large old basswood, whose blossoms in early summer made the air deliciously sweet. Ghost Walk was a path heavily planted with shrubs and vines, so that it was shady and consequently darkened. It went from the gardens in front of the old homestead to High Seat.
Now we're approaching the Campbell Foundation. This would have been the front porch you see in the old photographs. And behind me is what's left of the house, which is really just the foundation. We would have come in the front door here, a parlor on one side, another sitting room, a hallway down the center, and in the back the kitchen. But as you can see, all we have now left is some rocks that indicate the foundation of the original home. And 2 or 3 very large trees excuse me, that have fallen into the foundation. And that makes it very difficult for us to continue showing this off as a historic site, and you can't even really get around the artifacts and the foundation or the trail. So this is a big problem from a preservation standpoint. To the north, to the big garden that was shaped in a Maltese cross, and a large tree, a smoke tree. It's not here anymore, but it's shown in some of the old photographs. And occasionally they would refer to the house as Smoke Tree Inn. So if you can imagine this view to the lake being virtually open all the way from this knoll where the Campbell house sat. Nature has definitely reclaimed this land.
The most interesting work was the dividing and setting of the pinks, which bordered all the walks. This Grandma oversaw herself. Barberry bushes bordered the garden, which contained iris, poppies, and various annuals. When the work was finished, the hired man brought up a barrel of water from the lake, drawn by old Fanny, and each new plant was carefully watered. The old house was a rambling, red-roofed, clapboard-sided, one-story structure on a stone foundation. The central doorway opened into a long, low-ceilinged wide hallway. To the right was the front parlor. In it was a large Victorian sofa, just like the one in the back parlor. Several matching chairs, all upholstered in black haircloth, the prickly, itchy stuff. A small, adequate fireplace, and a tin panny square piano, which accompanied us at our morning worship. Away down the hall, almost to its end, on the left, was the entrance to the back parlor or sitting room, where Grandmother Campbell sat in all her glory, knitting and ruling the roost, with the help of Aunt Tina, daughter Caroline, and Uncle Forrest.
The back side of the house, where the kitchen would have been at the end of the long hall. The kitchen had bright sunny windows that looked out over the vegetable garden and the grape arbor and even cornfields beyond that. Again, hard to imagine today when you look at how overgrown the island is.
Not far from the Campbell house is evidence of one of the several wells that were dug on the island. Though they were surrounded by the lake, the islanders dug wells for fresh drinking water. This one is lined in concrete and still shows evidence of some of the original plumbing. Today, we're spoiled by being able to turn on the tap, but in the Islanders' days, it was the chore of the children, like this photo of Caroline Campbell, the daughter, gathering water from the pump over this well. We're now going to continue our journey headed north toward the Harvey cottage and the stone well that predates the concrete one we just saw.
In this area was an old three-trunked butternut tree, the trunks as large as a man's body. It ended in a wide gate to an opening going out the poorly marked road around the island, and across the road to the path down the hill to the stone dock and boat landing. Our house was a few hundred feet north of the farmers, at the eastern edge of the western woods.
This is what's left of the Harvey cottage today, really just the stones that made up the cellar foundation.
Extreme northwest of the fenced enclosure were the so-called Devendorf tents. Dr. Devendorf was founder of the Detroit Children's Hospital and a prominent Detroit physician.
Just a few steps from the Harvey Cottage Foundation and the likely site of the Devendorf tents is evidence of an old stone well. This originally would have been dug deep down to the water line, so those in this area could pull up fresh water for drinking. You can see how the creeping myrtle and the maple trees are trying to reclaim this site, and what a chore it is for volunteers from the Historical Society to keep these sites clear. Our journey continues, looking over what was once meadows and cornfields toward the homes of the caretakers, the barns and the outbuildings that would have supported island life. We'll also take a look at the western woods.
Dad raised a vegetable garden. My job was to ride horseback while he was cultivating with the plow. Kids hated that because you were riding all day long. Got pretty hot some days.
So the caretakers would have lived here year-round, cutting ice and taking care of trail maintenance and fence maintenance and anything else that needed to be done in the wintertime, and obviously tending to the animals and helping with the farm chores, collecting water for the families, that sort of thing, when they were here vacationing. So let's take a closer look. So as we approach the front porch, there's a chipmunk, so there is evidence there's a chipmunk, at least one chipmunk on the island. The house went both directions. If you look at the photographs when I show those, you'll see. But the foundation is only on this side of the house. There's what's the left of the coal chute in this corner right here. It's lined in metal, would have tried to keep the coal dry when it was delivered and deposited into the basement. And then there's a couple of other openings in the foundation that might have been windows or some other form of access to the basement.
Just a stone's throw from the caretaker's house is the foundation of the generator house. Below ground level is a pit and evidence of a large tank that may have held fuel oil, though we may never know for sure. The Campbell households were never electrified. This building would have generated electricity for the caretaker's home and the Ward family house that we'll see later in our journey.
This part of the island, the Campbells referred to as the Western Woods. It was never cleared of its big growth. And if you can tell, it's sort of undulating. And this is the area, the general area, where the islanders believe there might have been Indian burial mounds, because the ground is mounded in different places. There's been some scientific digging out here and research. Dr. David Brose in particular concluded it's not likely that these are Indian burial grounds, but to the islanders, they appreciated the mystique and the mystery and the possible presence that the native people had been here and left their mark.
We really lived in an Indian cemetery. On a quiet, secluded little valley of the woods was a mound somewhat larger than the others, and two smaller ones just north of it. Because of the unusual relics exhumed from it and taken to Scotland, we islanders at least believed Pontiac was buried there. Believe it or not, I do.
As we exit the western woods, we find ourselves on the southern Lakeshore Trail.
Whatever we did during the day, we tried to be in time for the 4 o'clock swim. The bathhouses were on the south side of the island. The stony shore precluded sunbathing. Each family had their own bathhouse. The girls' bathing garments were marvelous. It took a good swimmer to swim in one. Sometimes one of the most daring girls jumped off the end of the dock, took off her skirt and stockings, and enjoyed the swim. Once in a while on a Sunday afternoon, Uncle Forrest anchored the scow in deep water so that we could go swimming off it. Swimming evidently did not desecrate the Sabbath. Besides the buoyancy swimming in deep water gives, there was diving off the railing.
Our walk now takes us up the hill toward the site of the Ward house. Willis Ward lived in the area on the mainland and owned many acres around the lake. He was close friends with the Campbell family, and when the children, Forrest and Caroline Campbell, found the burden of tending to the island to be too much, Willis stepped in and purchased the island as his own family retreat. This would have been the facing south. You can see over there what appears to be chimney fragments because it's a lot of brick. Right here in front we have probably the front patio, and we look down straight away and we see what's left of the foundation, the construction bricks that have toppled over the years. More maple trees trying to reclaim the space. In this part of the house, we see a very long and narrow sort of basement with a really interesting extension back there. Nobody's given us clear indication why this basement is so skinny and long. I've heard suggestion that maybe they kept sailboat masts somehow down here and needed that kind of long, skinny storage. This was a relatively large house, occupied for a little over 20 years, but only in the summertime, and really went into disrepair when Willis Ward passed away in 1943. And so here you can see the rise in the ground and all these bricks. This might suggest that now we're looking at the old chimney. People who've lived in this area a long time say they remember being able to see the front of this house from the mainland through the trees before it became so overgrown. We'll finish our tour coming around from south to the western side of the island and head up toward an area we've referred to as the Cedars. So now we're walking along the southern shore of the island, coming around to what the islanders referred to as Comfort Point or West Point. very distinct feature of the island where the land drops right off out to this point.
Here, the spur which led into the lake enabled the farmers to drive right into the lake to fill the barrel with water, which he emptied into similar barrels outside our houses. These barrels used by the farmer were those in which whiskey, brandy, and alcohol were obtained from Walkerville by Father. These contents were used to fill pint and quart bottles, which Father sold for 25 cents and 50 cents, respectively.
As we conclude our trip around Apple Island, we approach an area we call the Cedars on the western shore, where tradition and evidence suggest native people may have encamped many, many years ago. Cool breezes off of the lake and a view of the evening sunset makes this an ideal place to settle down for the night and to end our tour.